Committee is meeting to consider 8 nominees, 9 legislative measures, and 11 postal naming bills. I note the presence of a quorum. As we wait for Ranking Member Portman to kick this off with our nominations, I'm going to move to our legislation en bloc. The committee will proceed to the consideration of 9 legislative measures and 11 postal naming bills. But before we vote en bloc, I believe Senator Scott wanted to briefly discuss one of his amendments to S 3875, the Peters-Portman Community Disaster Resilience Zone Act. Certainly I appreciate you working on a compromise language and your cost share amendment, Senator Scott, but I understand your desire to say a few words.
Yeah, it'll be real quick. First, I want to thank Chairman Peters and Ranking Member Portman for working with me on amendment for S 3875, the Community Disaster Resilience Zones Act of 2022. It's the cost share that we worked on. And I want to thank you for working with me on the Disaster Contract Improvement Act that we passed before. And as you know, that bill is going to hopefully improve disaster contracting process on the federal, local, and state levels of government following natural disasters, which unfortunately seems like every state has. It's also going to mitigate waste, fraud, and abuse. So I'm looking forward, and I want to thank you for your help again. I look forward to seeing this bill reported from committee in an expeditious fashion in order to have it considered on the floor of the Senate. With the chair's commitment with that bill, I'm going to withdraw any amendments I had.
Right. Well, thank you, Senator Scott. And I certainly understand your desire to move the legislation. And as you know, I'm a co-sponsor on the legislation with you. We're working very closely. We're currently waiting on a CBO score, at which point we'll finalize the committee report and get it to the floor. And I will join you in working to move it through the process. Moving on, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that we consider reporting the following legislation en bloc. S 3677 Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act, S 3875 Community Disaster Resilience Zones Act of 2022 as amended by a Peters substitute amendment as twice modified, S 3868 U.S. Customs and Border Protection Officer Retirement Technical Corrections Act as modified by a Peters-Portman substitute amendment, S 3511 Satellite Cybersecurity Act as amended by a Peters substitute as modified, and Ossoff Amendment Number 1, S 3903 to require the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection to establish procedures for conducting maintenance projects at ports of entry at which the Office of Field Operations conducts certain enforcement and facilitation activities as amended by a Langford Cinema substitute as modified, S 3650, periodically listing updates to management, the Plum Act of 2022, as amended by a Carper substitute amendment as modified, S 3655, Civil Rights Cold Case Investigation Support Act of 2022, S 3904, Healthcare Cybersecurity Act of 2022, as amended by a Rosen substitute amendment and a Rosen Amendment 2, S 3895, Legacy IT Reduction Act of 2022, as amended by a Hassan Amendment Number 1. We also have 11 postal naming bills. I said the wrong number. Somebody's correcting me. That's good. That's S 3897, Legacy IT Reduction Act of 2022, as amended by the Hassan Amendment Number 1. Then 11 postal naming bills, S 3884 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service dedicated at 404 U.S. Highway 41 north in Baraga, Michigan as the Cora Reynolds Anderson Post Office, S 3825 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 3903 Melier Drive in Arlington, Texas as the Ron Wright Post Office Building, S 3826 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1304 4th Avenue in Canyon, Texas as the Gary James Fletcher Post Office Building, HR 735 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 502 East Conte Avenue in Cotante, California as the Arturo Albleto Post Office Building, H.R. 1298 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1233 North Cedar Street in Owasso, Oklahoma, as the Technical Sergeant Marshal Roberts Post Office Building. H.R. 2324 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 2800 South Adams Street in Tallahassee, Florida, as the Edwina Stevens Post Office. H.R. 3539 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 223 West Shalon, Santa Papa in Ganta, Guam, as the Atanosi Taitono Perez Post Office. H.R. 3579 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 200 East Main Street in Maroa, Illinois, as the Jeremy L. Ridlin Post Office. H.R. 3613 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 202 Trumbull Street in St. Clair, Michigan, as the Corporal Jeffrey Roberts Standfast Post Office Building. H.R. 4168 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 6223 Maple Street in Omaha, Nebraska, as the Petty Officer First Class Charles Jackson French Post Office. And H.R. 5577 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 3900 Crown Road, Southwest in Atlanta, Georgia, as the John R. Lewis Post Office Building. Let me take a sip of water first, if I may, Senator Romney. Thank you for withdrawing that request. Hearing no objection to all those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The majority of members present having voted the affirmative, the ayes have it, and the measures read at length above are all reported favorably to the Senate. Senator Scott.
I just want to be recorded no on S3650.
You'll be recorded as such.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to be recorded as a no on S3650.
You will be recorded as such, Senator Hawley.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recorded yes on my bill.
Was it your bill?
And I just want to say, if I'd be recognized.
Absolutely, Senator Carper.
We use GAO for a lot of different purposes. One of the things that they do every 2 years at the beginning of every Congress, they put out something called a high-risk list. And for years I've used it as like a to-do list. And I think others on the committee have done that as well. One of the things that Gene Dodaro and the folks at GAO have done is they've suggested that we ought to make some changes with respect to the Plum Act, also known as the Periodically Listing and Updating Management Act. And I think this is good government. And I just want to thank Senator Langford and his staff for working with us to find a principled compromise. And I want to say again to Gene Dodaro and the folks at GAO, thank you again for giving us another good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and you, Mr. Chairman, for unanimously advancing my legislation to empower the investigation of civil rights cold cases. I met last week with the descendants of a victim of a racially motivated murder, decades old, and at a time when it can be difficult to build bipartisanship in Congress, I greatly appreciate the support from colleagues on both sides of the aisle to advance this important bipartisan legislation to ensure that truth and justice are sought and delivered in these civil rights cold cases, many of them vicious murders and lynchings that took place in my states and states across the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Office. I'd ask others to hold your comments so we can get to the nominations. And I'd certainly like to thank Ranking Member Portman and his staff for working with us to hold this markup and advance both the critical legislation we've already advanced as well as 8 nominations. We're also considering the nominations of Honorable Ernst D. Du Bester to be the member of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, Kurt T. Rumsfeld to be General Counsel, Federal Labor Relations Authority, Krista A. Boyd to be Inspector General, Office of Personnel Management, Honorable Dana Bilyeu to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, Javier Sade to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, Leona Bridges to be a member of the Federal Retirement Investment Board, Michael Gerber to be a member, Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, and Stacy Olivares to be a member, Federal Retirement Thrift Savings Board. I'm going to be very brief. I believe these are 8 highly qualified nominees who are ready to take on vital roles, and hope that my colleagues will join me in advancing their nominations today. But before we proceed to the consideration of the nominations, I recognize Ranking Member Portman, but again would ask members if you could hold your comments till afterwards so we can move these forward. Senator Portman, you're recognized for your opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I was co-chairing a meeting on Ukraine of the Ukrainian caucus, and I apologize for not being here earlier. I was told we were going to start at 11:15, but you guys started early, which is good. Senator Johnson's on his way. He was also at that meeting. We are considering these critical nominations you talked about, also some legislation. I want to thank you for working with us on some of this legislation to make some changes so that we could have a bipartisan approach. I think a lot of them are common sense to improve our resilience to natural disasters, strengthen borders and ports of entry, and ensure fair treatment of retiring customs and border protection officers. I'm supporting most of these nominees and bills, but I would like to address areas of concern. You just talked about the nominations for the Federal Labor Relations Authority. I am troubled that we are moving forward with these nominations, particularly the nominations of Ernest Dubester to be a member of the board, Kurt Rumsfeld to be the general counsel of the Federal Relations Authority. As all members of this committee are now aware, we received documents produced to a private party under the Freedom of Information Act suggesting that these individuals may have engaged in inappropriate conduct in their current offices. These are allegations only. The Republican members of this committee requested that the FLRA Inspector General look into these allegations, and we had hoped that our majority colleagues would join us, given the serious nature of these allegations. I'd like to enter our letter and the attachments into the record for the markup. That is this notebook. Mr. Chairman, I'd like unanimous consent to enter these into the record.
Without objection. Without objection.
In response to our request, the FLRA Inspector General is now actively investigating these individuals, so it was both a surprise and a disappointment to me when the majority decided to press forward with the confirmation process despite this fact. It is inappropriate to rush through nominees while those nominees are subject to an IG investigation. We've asked the IG to expedite this investigation, but until that investigation concludes, I must vote against advancing these nominees. We're also considering 5 nominees to the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, as you said, 4 of whom I believe are well qualified to serve on the board, and I will support their nominations. However, I cannot support Javier Sade. I believe he exhibited a serious lack of judgment in a series of partisan social media posts. I'm concerned about his ability to serve in this totally nonpartisan role. And one of the, as you know, one of the obligations of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board is to ensure that it is entirely nonpartisan. Decisions are not made based on a political basis. And that bias that I see troubles me. So it needs to be without bias to all TSP participants, regardless of party. So I will be opposing his nomination. Turning to legislation we have before us, we've worked in good faith to move these bills in a bipartisan fashion. That said, the periodically listing updates to management, the so-called Plum Act of 2022, raises serious privacy concerns for federal political appointees, I believe, and I can only support the bill if it is an amendment to lengthen the reporting period required by the bill. I am pleased we're considering the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act, which I've co-authored. It's a bipartisan bill. That bill will allow FEMA to reimburse states for counseling services rendered during declared emergencies. Mental health is often overlooked in these post-disaster recovery operations, and this bill will help survivors access those services. So, again, Mr. Chairman, Senator Johnson's here now. I look forward to the committee's consideration of that legislation and the other important bills and nominees we are considering today.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Just in a brief response to a couple of the points that you raised, and we'll get to the roll call votes. I certainly support this committee doing its due diligence to ensure that nominees we consider are qualified for their roles, regardless of the party of the president. I'm disappointed that my Republican colleagues are delaying or attempting to delay the FLRA nominees. The nominees have submitted detailed information to the committee that addresses what are politically motivated accusations by anti-labor activists. And without objection, I'd like to enter their information into the record. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Republicans requested an investigation without even speaking with the nominees about their concerns. That is not a way that I would hope that we would operate. Mr. DeBester has been unanimously approved for a Senate-confirmed position 5 times before this. This committee has also voted 3 times unanimously in favor of Mr. DeBester's appointment to the Federal Labor Relations Authority, including under President Trump. Further delaying his confirmation undermines the FLRA's ability to carry out its important responsibilities, including enforcing fair labor practices for hardworking federal employees and upholding collective bargaining rights established in statute. Now the committee will proceed with a vote on the nominations.
Mr. Chairman, I've asked for one minute for a rebuttal to your comments. None of these allegations had been made at the times that we previously considered in these nominations. And all we're asking for is that the IG have a chance to look at it. The IG says they'll do it and do it quickly. We've asked them to expedite it. I would think this committee would want to know, rather than moving ahead with nominations with these kind of serious allegations. They are only allegations, but let's get to the bottom of it and do it quickly.
We will now consider the nomination of Honorable Ernst DeBester to be a member of the Federal Labor Relations Authority. The question is on whether to favorably report Mr. DeBester's nomination. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Carper. Aye. Senator Hassan. Aye. Senator Sinema. Aye. Senator Rosen. Aye. Senator Padilla. Aye. Senator Ossoff. Aye. Senator Portman.
No.
Senator Johnson.
No.
Senator Paul.
No.
Senator Langford.
No.
Senator Romney.
No.
Senator Scott. Senator Hawley. No. Senator Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 7, the nays are 7. On the vote by proxy and for the record only, the yeas are 0, the nays are 0. On this vote, the yeas are 7, the nays are 7, and the motion to report the nominee is not agreed to.
The vote being tied, the nomination is not reported. And while I'm disappointed this nomination will not advance today, I will work with the Majority Leader to have Mr. DeBester's nomination discharged from the committee for consideration by the full Senate. We will now consider the nomination of Kurt Rumsfeld to serve as General Counsel for the Federal Labor Relations Authority. The question is on whether to favorably report Mr. Rumsfeld's nomination. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Carper. Aye. Senator Hassan. Aye. Senator Sinema. Aye. Senator Rosen. Aye. Senator Padilla. Aye. Senator Ossoff. Aye. Senator Portman.
No.
Senator Johnson.
No.
Senator Paul.
No.
Senator Langford. No. Senator Romney. No. Senator Scott. No. Senator Hawley. No. Senator Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 7, the nays are 7. On this vote, on the vote by proxy for the record only, the yeas are 0, the nays are 0. On this vote, the yeas are 7, the nays are 7, and the motion to report the nominee is not agreed to.
The vote being tied, the nomination is not reported to the Senate. And once again, while I'm disappointed this nomination will not advance today, I will work with the Majority Leader to have Mr. Rumsfeld's nomination discharged from the committee for full consideration by the Senate. Next, we will actually consider 2 separate nominations for Mr. Sade. He has been nominated to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board for the remainder of the term expiring October 11th, 2022, and for a second term expiring October 11th, 2026. We will have a roll call vote, but I would ask for unanimous consent to consider both of Mr. Sade's nominations on block. Having no objection, we will do that, and the clerk will call the roll.
Senator Carper.
Aye.
Senator Hassan. Aye. Senator Sinema. Aye. Senator Rosen. Aye. Senator Padilla. Aye. Senator Ossoff. Aye. Senator Portman.
No.
Senator Johnson.
No.
Senator Paul.
No.
Senator Langford. No. Senator Romney.
No.
Senator Scott.
No.
Senator Hawley. No. Senator Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 7, the nays are 7. On the vote by proxy and for the record only, the yeas are 0, the nays are 0. On this vote, the yeas are 7, the nays are 7, and the motion to report the nominee is not agreed to.
The vote being tied, the nominations are not reported. And once again, while I'm disappointed the nominations will not advance today, I'll work with the Majority Leader to have Mr. Sade's nominations discharged from the committee for consideration by the full Senate. The committee will now proceed to consideration of 5 nominees. I would ask unanimous consent that we consider reporting the following nominations on block. Christina Boyd to be the Inspector General of the Office of Personnel Management, Honorable Dana Bilyeu to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, Leona Bridges to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, Michael Gerber to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board for a term expiring September 25 of 2022, Michael Gerber to be a member of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board for a term expiring September 25, 2026, Stacy Oliviers to be a member of the Federal Retirement Investment Board. Hearing no objection, all those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed will say nay. The majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the ayes have it, and the nominations are reported favorably to the Senate.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott,
can you mark me down as a no except for Krista Boyd?
you will be marked accordingly. Senator Hawley?
I'd also like to be recorded as a no for Ms. Boyd.
Senator Hawley will be marked accordingly.
Mr. Chairman,
Excuse me, did you say, would you repeat your request, please?
Mine was, I was no except for Krista Boyd. I'm yes for Krista Boyd.
Okay. And Senator Hawley, were you?
I'm a yes on everybody but Ms. Boyd. I want to be a no.
Did you guys get together before? Practice this?
Just to make it complicated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I recognize senators to speak, I would like to recognize Eric Bursch, who is the staff director for Government Operations Subcommittee for Chair Sinema. He's moving on after 7 years running this subcommittee, first for Senator Heinkamp and then Senator Sinema. Eric, thanks for all your hard work and best of luck in your new chapter. With that, would any senator wish to be recognized? Senator Rosen.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Portman, for holding today's markup, which includes my legislation, the Healthcare Cybersecurity Act. It's bipartisan legislation I introduced with Senator Cassidy. Hospitals and healthcare centers are part of our critical infrastructure and increasingly are the targets of malicious cyber attacks, which can result in data breaches, and the cost of care gets driven up and can have negative patient health outcomes. Last week, President Biden specifically warned American companies, including those in the healthcare and public health sector, to take immediate action to harden their defenses against potential Russian cyber attacks. In light of these threats, we must take proactive steps to enhance the cybersecurity of our healthcare and our public health entities. To improve the cybersecurity of hospitals and healthcare centers, the Healthcare Cybersecurity Act directs CISA and the Department of Health and Human Services to share threat information with the health sector and provide cybersecurity training to relevant healthcare professionals. I look forward to seeing this legislation advance so we can ensure healthcare entities can protect themselves from rapidly evolving cyber threats. I yield back.
Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you and Ranking Member Portman and your staffs for coordinating this markup today. I am pleased to see that my bipartisan bill with Senator Cornyn, the Legacy IT Reduction Act, moved out of committee today. Updating government technology will save taxpayer dollars, strengthen cybersecurity, and improve Americans' interactions with federal agencies. This common sense bill will help ensure that the federal government isn't wasting taxpayer dollars or risking cyber attack simply because it hasn't updated the necessary technology systems or equipment. While I did not offer Hassan Amendment 2, I look forward to continuing to work on the important issue of funding IT modernization projects. It's critical that we expand access to IT working capital funds and the Technology Modernization Fund to help agencies finance their IT modernization projects in a fiscally responsible way. I encourage my colleagues to support funding for IT modernization and to support ways to fund these modernization projects in a way that promotes better stewardship of taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Langford.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. There's several things that we worked on today. Obviously, it was good to be able to see the committee working together so much on so many different bills, a wide variety of topics on this. I do want to thank Senator Carper's staff and Senator Carper for the work that we did together dealing with the Plum Act. His team was great to be able to work with, heard our concerns on this, and we were able to address that concern. And so that's the way we should be able to work together on it. We've also moved a piece dealing with CBP and GSA. If any of us have been down to the border and be able to visit with CBP in those port facilities, we've seen problems there. They often raise those with GSA. It's a very bureaucratic process to be able to move very minor maintenance issues. This allows greater flexibility to do some upkeep on those GSA facilities. So I appreciate the committee working on that so much. We also moved H.R. 1298, which from Representative Kevin Hearn and myself that actually pulled this together, honoring Technical Sergeant Marshall Roberts, who was killed in Iraq in 2020 on March the 11th. He was killed by a Katyusha rocket fired from Iranian militias there in Iraq and was murdered on the spot. So honoring him with that post office was a significant thing for that entire community on this. One of the areas that I was surprised that we did move on today was the issue of DeBester. The notebook and all of the details that have come in on some of his ex parte conversations and the frequent email dialogue that has occurred saying this is not public yet, but I'm sending this to union representatives, I've sent it to other folks that were currently in front. I can't imagine either side would look at that and say that's good for someone who is in this position to be able to take. So I am surprised that it's moved. I understand that there is an investigation from the IG that's currently moving. People can read through the emails as they choose to on their own, but there's ex parte conversations, there's releasing of unpublished information to outside parties that are affected by that. I think that's serious. There's also Hatch Act issues that are in here that are pretty blatant on their face. Let me just read one of them to you that it's difficult for me to be able to process and say, well, let's just go ahead and move on this. This is from DeBester, was sending this out to leadership of the AFL-CIO and sent this note in September the 17th, 2018, following up on the FLRA's imminent closure of our Dallas regional office, particularly in context of my dissent's observation that Texas has the second largest number of federal employees outside of Washington, D.C. metro, wondering whether this is worth getting to Beto's campaign somehow. I understand that's not the biggest item on his priority list, but it's for the right audiences, it's an issue that could be enlarged to make a meaningful point. Then the response back from the AFL-CIO leadership, who responds back, I think informing Beto of our concerns is a good idea. I'll contact his campaign and provide talking points. Can you resend me the talking points? Clearly, this is engagement in a federal campaign from an official task to an outside entity to say, let's work together. I'm going to get campaign talking points to you on an issue that's not public. Again, there are just so many, page after page after page of issues that are here. I don't see why we don't pause and to say, why aren't these answered, especially when the FLRA currently has a quorum, DeBester is already on this board and is there. Why we suddenly have to be able to move this today doesn't make sense to me on this. So I raise that. I understand we've already had the tie vote 7-7, and it's not moved, but that point and many others is why we have concerns and we think they're well-founded.
Thank you, Senator Langford. I want to, first off, applaud your leadership on Senate Bill 3903. You're right about these port facilities. We do need to make improvements, and I appreciate your leadership on that. I would like to add my name as a co-sponsor to your bill, and I will work with you to try to expedite it through the process as well, Senator. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noted earlier my appreciation to colleagues in both parties to advance my legislation to support these investigations of civil rights cold cases. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your support. I was in Irwinton, Georgia, last Friday, meeting with local leaders about the funding that Congress has appropriated to build a new public sewer system for that county, the first in its history. And I had the chance to sit down with the descendants and relatives of Caleb Hill, Jr. And Mr. Hill in 1949 was dragged at night from the county jail and shot to death by a lynch mob. And no one's ever been brought to justice. And so for this committee today, Democrats and Republicans, to unite to advance legislation that ensures the federal government can support the continued investigation of cases like Mr. Hill's to seek truth and justice is meaningful and vital to serve the values of truth and justice. So I thank again the committee for their support. I also want to thank the committee for adopting via amendment my Enhancing Satellite Cybersecurity Act as an amendment to the underlying Satellite Cybersecurity Act that this committee unanimously voted to advance to the floor. My bill, in the form of an amendment, would assess and address the potential cybersecurity risks posed by foreign ownership or control of commercial satellites or of physical infrastructure supporting satellite communications where such infrastructure is based outside of U.S. borders. I thank Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and Senator Cornyn for their work on this crucial issue. And finally, just want to note and mark that we moved forward legislation to name a post office building in Atlanta, Georgia, after civil rights legend and my mentor, Congressman John Lewis. That means a lot to the people of Atlanta, to the people of Georgia, and I thank the committee for their support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff, and thank you for your leadership on all of those issues. Any other member wishes to make a statement? If not, this business meeting is now adjourned.